So hopefully by the time this video comes out, the date will be June 12th. And if that is the case, then today would mark the 4th anniversary of Phineas and Ferb's series finale. This show is considered an old soul of sorts, enjoying a long lifespan of 8 years, tons of merchandising and entertainment opportunities, the admiration and respect of many celebrities, and a very, very long summer. Despite its formulaic story structure, the story behind its success has much more history to it than you could ever imagine. The 2000s were considered a lousy time for television animation. While many say it was the worst decade for it, mostly relegated to what happened in the North American industry, I'd call it more of a transitional period. The 90s were an exciting and refreshing time for TV animation, where the stories were driven by the creators, not really entertainment executives pushing toys. I would generally consider it more of the same from the golden age of animation, but with a wilder twist. The 2000s ushered in newer technologies that the 90s generally hadn't conceived yet. Flash and CG were in their infancy, but at times, we can infer that the software got a bit more credibility than the stories. Primarily, companies were just looking to work on their shows with more cost-effective options. It was a rough period, but far from the worst. When the 90s creator-driven movement changed the landscape, this kind of TV animation is still being developed. Disney was the first one to spearhead the whole movement by making 3 or 4 blocks of new cartoons for different generations of children. The first block, the Disney Afternoon, was ushered in unofficially with the creation of 3 pilots: Fluffy Dogs, The Wuzzles, and DuckTales. All 3 pilots were made with high-quality animation and complex storytelling beats, which were generally considered uncommon for what were supposed to be very simple Saturday morning stories. And while all 3 were just meant to be a test, only the latter stood out as a true success. And after the success of DuckTales, Disney hit the ground running with 7 more years of cartoons for this one block. Even if some of the cartoons weren't of the same high quality as their predecessors, they were still wildly memorable either way. This memorability remains strong today, as many of the iconic afternoon series have full series releases digitally and through DVD. The success of the Disney Afternoon prompted them to launch One Saturday Morning on ABC. Armed with the acquisition of former Nicktoon Doug, paired up with Recess and Pepper Ann, Disney originals, they began to chase after the success they had just a few years prior. The aforementioned series were the highest rated on the block, while other original series became obscure and subsequently buried. They're acknowledged in a positive light critically, but were overshadowed by the 24/7 networks Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network, who are collectively bringing in a lot more cartoons to a lot more time slots. Disney started to notice how much of an animated surplus they had in the television sphere. Thus, Toon Disney was founded, which became a more visible hub for the TV cartoons of the 90s and beyond. Their content varied from original action comedies through Jetix to former Saturday morning content to even Sonic Underground at some point. As expansive as these programs got, they were being seen by fewer and fewer people, and to overlap slightly with the end of One Saturday Morning, Disney started making more cartoons for Disney Channel. Shows like Kim Possible, Lilo and Stitch, and American Dragon Jake Long began airing, and were fetching excellent ratings. Generally, the early 2000s was when Disney Channel ruled the roost. It found its new groove, if you will, with its signature style of tween sitcoms and animated series aimed at adventurous preteens. The former seemed to have influence on the show after the premiere of Lizzie McGuire, which solidified the presence of the genre on the network. Similar to One Saturday Morning, many cartoons were more or less acknowledged fewer times than they were just a decade before. And since the sitcoms were cheaper to make and presumably more successful, it was easier for Disney to edge closer to that type of programming. During the course of the 2000s, they released the smallest section of new TV cartoons ever, while the sitcoms got more and more time slots and resources. It was unclear what Disney was going to do next, but soon enough, the summer of 2007 changed everything. On August 17th, Disney Channel released High School Musical 2 and paired that up with the relatively unknown pilot they had, Phineas and Ferb. High High School Musical 2 netted 17.6 million views, and as a result, Phineas and Ferb netted a cool 10.8 million views. While it was eager High School Musical fans that made up the majority of viewers that fateful day, that's not to say the show couldn't prove interesting to viewers on its own. In fact, Disney delayed its original 2007 release in the US to February to give it a wider release abroad. So places like Latin America, Brazil, Japan, France, and Portugal all got to experience the show at the same time we did in the United States. When the international promotion rolled out, it only netted the show even more press. It became one of Japan's most popular Western cartoons. It got wild promotion in Latin America and most of Europe, which made excellent dubs and gave the show its lion's share of time slots. It was really well received. And thus the cycle began. First came DVDs and games, and then interviews and guest spots and movies and Disney park attractions and live events, and then omnipresence. Well, you know what, scratch that last one. It may have jumped the gun on that one, but you get the idea. The TV movie itself was more or less the peak of the show's quality. It remains the 10th most watched DCOM premiere of all time, and the show remains one of the longest running animated series of the main Disney networks. I think the last time Disney mass merchandised a TV cartoon this much was probably Kim Possible. The last one not already being a franchise perhaps would be either Doug or Recess. The show is even part of the Marvel and Star Wars universes, non-canonically of course. Put those pitchforks away. Disney has allowed this humble little cartoon show to be elevated to new heights, but it only got all those things due to its appeal anyway. It had everything that Disney could have wanted. It had likable protagonists, it had innocent motifs, it had enough songs to last you a good year, it had episodic adventures with wide replay value, and had tons of mass marketable appeal. This simple show connected people all across the world through its multifaceted yet deceptively rudimentary themes. And while this show raised the bar at the time, it also left the bar to be raised another notch. In 2012, Gravity Falls premiered as a sneak peek behind the DCOM Let It Shine. While not an instant rating smash, it quickly became one of the most critically acclaimed Disney TV cartoons of all time. The spotlight quickly began to fade on the smartest stepbrothers around as new episodes were coming out more and more infrequently. While the numbers were still big enough to make Teen Titans Go mutter in awed jealousy initially, it still was becoming less of a driving force on the main network. However, on Disney XD, it's still widely adored and pushed. I remember how I felt watching day-long marathons several times a month, sometimes without a reason. Despite its mass appeal, Phineas and Ferb could be giving the folks at XD a very easy excuse to spam the show in excess, until XD found its groove with its own lineup of animated programs. They would continue to spam PNF for what felt like eons, and to this day, they still occasionally air it in primetime slots. After the success of the series, Disney went from relying on a few filler shows to releasing a new show basically every year, and truly giving them all the promotion they could muster. While not all series got the treatment we wanted them to have, a lot more of them have come and gone to try to re-innovate the brand. Phineas and Ferb played a huge role in convincing Disney to put more stock into their animated television division. After the show's success, Disney started to actively seek out new talent and stories again. Alex Hirsch was asked to make the Gravity Falls pilot for him after seeing his work. Kick Buttowski and Pickle and Peanut, for as much flack as they got back in the day, they were, to an extent, a sign that the Mouse House was trying to experiment and make their lineup more animated. The latter of which especially seems like a personal pet project that represented what XD wanted to get out of quirky comedies. I'm sure the networks would have reinvented their cartoon lineup eventually, but Phineas and Ferb brought it out sooner and in the best of ways. These kids were kind of Disney Channel celebrities back in their day. They served as mascots for all sorts of stuff, but they were also idols in their own right. They were truly part of the Disney Channel family. When you can summon a bunch of popular characters from the other live-action sitcoms, all the dance for possibly hours just to make a 2-minute music video in the name of a teal platypus made out of digital ink and pixels, you know you hit the prime time. Due to how influential it is, it's no surprise that Phineas and Ferb remains a Disney Channel fan favorite well after its run was completed. Its benefits and the impact it's had on the network and wider society makes it a standout, and it definitely deserves to be treasured for years to come. And so it has. 4 years after the fact, the relatively numerous amount of appearances its characters have made is somewhat surprising. As a series that presumably went out on its own terms, it repeatedly popped up again in recent years for various reasons. Whether it made sense or not, the Danville residents would soon begin to leak into facets of the public consciousness again, until it spilled over into an expansion of its own universe entirely. Clearly, they didn't hear out Weird Al's title sequence. It's his world, and they're all living in it.